From a secret time machine to an underground kingdom, here are 9 of the most mysterious locked doors that can never be opened. Qin Shi Huang's Secret Tomb. Deep in the hills of Xi'an, China, there is a giant collection of terracotta soldiers made by Chinese citizens in the 3rd century BC dedicated to the memory of China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. This collection of sculpted soldiers is astounding enough on its own, but the area bears even further mystery. For over 2,000 years, no one has entered Qin Shi Huang's tomb, in spite of our knowledge of its location. You might ask, why don't we just go inside? Well, on the first hand, we quite simply do not have the technology available to do so effectively. Archaeologists do not want to disturb anything within the tomb, but rather hope to keep everything intact. Another reason is that ancient texts claim that Qin Shi Huang had an entire underground kingdom, and that he might have placed large rivers of mercury around his resting place. This would make the project of exploring his tomb extremely dangerous. And indeed, samples indicate high concentrations of mercury around his tomb. The emperor likely passed away from ingesting mercury trying to live forever, so it is fitting that mercury is what should make it so difficult to investigate his tomb. But hopefully archaeologists can take a look somehow. Maybe with some sort of scanning device? Who knows what we could learn. Sealed mausoleum in Aztec ruins. The Aztecs were known for their braveness and offerings tendencies, which makes them an intimidating group of people. It seems that the more we find out about them, the more there is to fear. That is why when recent excavations in tunnels below the Aztec temple of Templo Mayor received a pair of sealed burial chambers, people were abuzz with curiosity. Archaeologists think that these tombs might house some of the great kings of the Aztec kingdom. They think this because the space below Templo Mayor seems to have been used like a ritualistic area where kings' corpses were cremated. But they want to be careful before proceeding into the sealed mausoleums. The site is too fragile to proceed without caution, but the things that they've found at the site are undoubtedly evocative and make the sealed tombs even more mysterious. For example, they found a large box containing the rests of children and eagles. The nature of their remains makes it clear that these rests likely came from a sacrifice. Hopefully archaeologists figure out a way to open up this tomb soon, because it would be nice to know what is going on here and what mysterious things are still there. And now for number 7, but first be sure to subscribe if you are new here, and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on our latest videos. Vault B. In the Indian state of Kerala lies one of the few and most revered temples dedicated to the Hindu deity Mahavishnu. Known as the Sri Padmanabhaswamy, try to say that 3 times fast, the temple was built in the 6th century AD and is covered in gold and is very impressive. Temples are beautiful places, and India has some of the most beautiful ornate temples in the world. But of all of them, the Padmanabhaswamy temple might just take the cake. Some say that it is the richest temple on earth. The entire building is plated in gold, and over the years, many have uncovered troves upon troves of treasures from its hidden chambers. But there is one chamber that remains unopened. The famed Vault B. The reason that it is yet unopened range from religious to downright superstitious. For one thing, there are supposedly many Hindu deities guarding the vault. Because it is such a holy place, people fear for their own lives and do not dare to open its doors. Legends say that those who attempt to pass through the vault will encounter a catastrophic fate. Anyway, many other such vaults in the temple have been opened to reveal great treasures. In 1908, there was a failed attempt to open a vault. The explorers left the room when they found the chamber infested with cobras. In 1931, when the government of Kerala was financially in need, another group of explorers opened the vault successfully. When they opened the chamber, they found a treasure of gold coins. The Vault B remains shut. While some say that Vault B has in fact been opened a few times, others have said this is the only antechamber and not Vault B itself. 3 years ago, the government of India wanted to open the Vault B, but the Travancore royal family and many religious devotees disagreed with this order. This was because they made a ritual called Devaprasnam, in which a young person served as an instrument to the deities to interact and convey their wishes on the fate of the temple. After the ritual, the deity was apparently not pleased, wishing the treasures not to be disturbed and the Vault B not be opened. Those who performed the ritual said the opening of Vault B will cause catastrophic events of apocalyptic proportions. Side note, Auditor General Vinod Rai challenged the superstitions surrounding Vault B in 2015 when he informed the court that the chamber had been opened without incident several times since the 1990s. It remains closed, however, per the wishes of devotees, temple officials, and the royal Travancore family. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Aramu Muru. In the early 90s, mountaineer Jose Memani discovered Aramu Muru, a peculiar rock formation located deep inside the Peruvian countryside, smooth to a flat surface, and adorned with strange features. It stuck out from the rest of the landscape. Aramu Muru is actually close to the Bolivian border, right next to Lake Titicaca. It is fairly large, standing at 23 square feet with a strange alcove, which happens to look a lot like a doorway, standing around 6.5 feet tall. No one is certain of Aramu Muru's original purpose, but it was likely constructed by the Incas. However, the most interesting aspect of Aramu Muru is its mysterious doorway. People have referred to this door as the Gate of the Gods, and a legend has it that people sometimes enter through the door never to be seen again. The native Peruvian people say that the way their ancestors opened the door was using a golden disc that fell from the sky. People even report paranormal lights passing through it, but none of these rumors have been confirmed. However, it is definitely scary to think that this doorway is a portal to some other realm. Brompton Cemetery. In terms of doors that should never be opened, high up on the list would be coffin doors, but some people are inclined to reject these intuitions. In fact, a couple of people in West London are hoping to unlock a mausoleum door at the Brompton Cemetery, home to over 35,000 monuments in total, which they believe may be a fully functioning time machine. The mausoleum itself is imposing on its own. Made entirely out of granite and standing at around 20 feet tall, the tomb houses Hannah Courtois and two of her daughters. Inscribed on the front of the mausoleum are hieroglyphics, and the key to the tomb is lost. Because the building hasn't been accessed since it was constructed in the 1850s, this has led people to speculate that it may be a time machine. Stephen Coates, a film composer, thinks that it is more like a teleportation device and wants to get a large bronze key made to open the chamber. And because of this, the theories surrounding the mausoleum have grown enormous. But it is true that we will never know what the Brompton Cemetery tomb holds inside. What do you think is in this chamber? Let me know in the comments below. Onkalo Nuclear Waste Facility. Located in Finland, the Onkalo Nuclear Waste Facility is not a literal door, but is definitely a place that no one can ever enter. It is currently finishing up its construction, and it will serve as the final resting place for spent nuclear fuel. It will be the first place on Earth to serve such a purpose. The facility itself has been constructed 455 meters inside the bedrock. Once nuclear fuel has been spent, it will be sent to this storage facility underground, where it will be wrapped in cast iron and copper containers and then welded shut in order to prevent leakage. The designers of this facility don't want any waste to escape. This facility was made to process the nuclear waste and make it non-aggressive with nature. The idea is to store these elements underground for 100,000 years without any negative consequences for the planet. So if any of these elements escape its capsule, it will not affect the environment. Of course, given the dangers associated with nuclear waste, you can never see the location itself. It will be packed full of canisters containing some of the most dangerous elements in our galaxy. Indeed, its creators are planning on constructing some sort of sign in front of the facility to tell future members of humanity who happen to stumble upon the site to steer clear. This is a deadly place. Hotel ZaZa. Hotel ZaZa is a popular Houston hotel, but they don't want you to hear about room 322. In fact, on the occasions where they've accidentally let someone stay in room 322, the visitors were in for a shock. The room does not look like your average hotel experience. There is a solid brick wall on one side of the room, and the walls are adorned with creepy paintings. Really creepy paintings. There is one of a skull, another of a strange albino man with an angry look on his face, and one more of two ghostly twins. There is also a picture of Jay Camo, president of the Stanford Financial Group, hanging up. What's more, the bed is chained to the wall, and the mirror looks like it is a two-way. Naturally, guests who were put into this room were creeped out and had some questions, but the hotel staff just shuffled them away into another room. And although they have other concept suites at the hotel with themed decorations, you cannot book 322. No one is quite sure what its purpose is. Some conspiracy theorists say that it is related to the Skull and Bone Society, given the importance that they place on the number 322. Others say it's just a marketing scam, but even though knowing why you can't stay in 322 is a whole mystery. Would you want to stay in this room? Let me know in the comments below. Room 873. Built in 1888, the Banff Springs Hotel is situated in the rolling snowy hills of Alberta, Canada. It is so breathtaking that it is listed as a Canadian Historical Heritage Site. But the legend goes, the hotel is also home to a terrifying secret in room 873. You can't actually stay in room 873 any longer. If you walk through the halls, you won't even be able to find it. This is because it has been walled off. It goes straight from room 871 to room 875. But what happened in 873? Stories say that years ago, a man murdered his family before taking his own life. After the investigation had concluded, the room was opened again for business, but guests were so routinely terrorized by paranormal activity, such as flashing lights, piercing screams, and bloody handprints, that eventually the hotel closed it for good. Whether or not this is definitely what happened, something went down in 873. Hotel employees have scripted responses to questions, evading them entirely. All signs indicate that beyond the blank wall, there is a boarded up room. This is a door that cannot be opened any longer, and we may never know what really happened in room 873. Sealed rooms in the Taj Mahal. Rumor has it that there's an ancient and sacred temple hidden in the basement of the Taj Mahal. In 1632, the Taj Mahal was constructed by Indian Shah Jahan for his wife Mumtaz Mahal. It is one of the biggest mausoleums in the world. Not only a tomb, but it has a mosque and guest house to round the whole thing off. However, the Taj Mahal also contains a total of 22 secret rooms which have never been exposed to the public eye. Their doors remain shut. There is a great deal of speculation concerning what lies behind these closed doors. Some people say that these rooms would reveal the true nature of the Taj Mahal as a Hindu temple dedicated to Lord Shiva, and its discoverers are keeping this hush-hush. But why keep this quiet? Perhaps some suggest to stave off tension. The Taj Mahal is one of the most revered places in the world, and maybe the world just can't handle the truth. In 1974, American architect Marvin Mills took a photograph of the red sandstone base of the Taj Mahal from behind the building. In the picture, there's a set of wooden doors. Mills sent a piece of the wood for carbon dating, and it was estimated to be 250 years older than the Taj Mahal itself. When word spread about the doors, authorities quickly sealed them off with bricks. For years, officials only provided cryptic and nonsensical explanations about the Taj Mahal's basement, including that they sealed entrances to avoid mummified remains from becoming contaminated by outside air. However, entrances that are too small for a human to fit through, such as ventilation shafts, have not been sealed. Some people say that the walls of these closed-off inner chambers are made of marble, and that exposing them would turn them into calcium carbonate. Chipping away its beauty after enough erosion, some parts of the Taj Mahal could even collapse. Some historians believe that the Taj Mahal was built atop an already existing structure, and that the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan acquired the site from another king called Jai Singh. Another belief is that the Taj Mahal, an Islamic place of worship, was built over a Hindu temple, and that whatever is underground contains evidence of a religious cover-up. From a gateway to the underworld to a crumbling amusement park, these are 10 abandoned places you aren't allowed to visit. The Superconducting Super Collider, Texas. The largest particle collider in the world is hidden beneath the ground near Geneva in Switzerland, but there were once plans to build something on a completely different level. Keeping truth to the state's ethos that everything is bigger in Texas, the desert outside the town of Waxahachie was chosen as the location for the Superconducting Super Collider, which, if it had been completed, would have been more than 3 times as big as the one in Europe, with a length of almost 55 miles. Construction began in 1991, but after spending $2 billion on the project, work was suspended because of the spiraling costs. 15 miles of tunnels had already been dug by this time, along with several buildings along the route, and while most of the structures were flooded to help retain their stability, the others were locked down and forgotten about. Access to the site is strictly prohibited because of safety concerns and the possibility that there's still some top secret equipment lying around, and amazingly, most people who live nearby have no idea that any of it actually exists. Pluto's Gate, Turkey. Pluto's Gate was a monument near the ancient Greek city of Hierapolis. In modern-day Turkey, that was dedicated to Pluto, the god of the afterlife. It's thought to have been built around 2,000 years ago on top of a cave that was said to lead to the underworld, but after a series of earthquakes in the 6th century, the temple collapsed and the site was forgotten about. The place was mentioned in the writings of several academics from the time, however, and archaeologists had long sought the mythical ruins. It was finally unearthed in 1963, but there's more to this monument than it first appears. The cave beneath has a crack in the rock that allows the release of harmful gases from below, and can kill someone within a matter of minutes. The Greek priests used to sell birds and small animals to visitors who could see the deadly effects for themselves, but countless people are also thought to have died there too. As a result, no one's allowed anywhere close to it today because by the time you realize the danger, it's too late. Researchers have to wear breathing apparatus to conduct their studies, but this is one historical site that remains off limits to everyone else. Poia Italy. Most people think of Venice as being the most romantic city in the world, and with somewhere between 22 and 30 million visitors each year, space is definitely at a premium. There's an island in the lagoon, though, which no one's allowed to go to because of serious health risks, and because it's believed to be haunted. Poia was first inhabited in the year 421, but from 1776 it was used as a quarantine facility. Every ship that arrived in the area had to stop there first to be checked, and after several arrivals of crew infected with the bubonic plague, it became where infectious people were sent to either recover or die without passing it on to others. Following this, it was converted into a psychiatric hospital that became renowned for experimenting with new techniques, and the remains of some of these horrific treatments can still be seen on the island to this day. The ghosts of those who were mistreated are said to still roam the beaches, and fishermen who sail too close return with paranormal stories. There are plans to completely redevelop the island, but for now, the crumbling buildings are a reminder to its cruel history. RAF Upper Hayford. RAF Upper Hayford was an airbase that was first used by the British Air Force from 1916 and would go on to be used by American troops in the 1950s. It was used as a base for B-52 bombers and U-2 spy planes to give the US a perfect starting point for flights over Soviet territory, and had become the largest fighter base in Europe by the beginning of the 70s. It was officially closed in 1993, however, with other sites being seen as more effective. Since then, it has fallen into a state of disrepair, and it is even believed to be haunted because of a murder-suicide that is said to have happened there. The only official uses now are as a film set, and you might recognize it from the James Bond filmed Octopussy, or more recently, World War Z. Due to the confidential information that's still on the site, such as clues as to how pilots were trained and Air Force procedures, which will still be used today, it remains a classified site, and so no one's allowed to visit unless expressly permitted by authorities. North Brother Island, New York. New York City is one of the most built up and populated pieces of land in the world, but there still remains some places that haven't been developed, one of which is North Brother Island. The 20-acre plot of land which lies in the East River between the Bronx and Rikers Island has had a dark history, and because of that, it's remained largely untouched and off-limits since 1963. The first structures were built there in 1885 when the Riverside Infectious Diseases Hospital needed to be relocated. At first, it was used to treat smallpox victims, but further structures were built for other ailments such as the tuberculosis pavilion. Typhoid Mary was famously confined on the island to prevent her from infecting anyone else, but by the 40s the hospital had closed. 10 years later it reopened as a drug addiction facility, but became embroiled in controversy when their methods were exposed, essentially locking addicts into rooms until they were clean. It was shut in 1963, and despite a number of plans being put forward about how to use it once more, no firm decisions have yet been made. Randall Park Mall, Ohio. Malls are a common sight around the world, providing visitors with a variety of different stores under one roof. Not all of them are as successful as their developers would hope, though, and one of the biggest failures was the Randall Park Mall in Ohio. Covering an area of 2.2 million square feet and at a cost of $175 million, it was the largest mall in the world when it opened in 1976. The ceremony was as extravagant as the structure, with 5,000 guests being served 1,200 pounds of shrimp, crab, and turkey before looking around the 200 stores, and for 33 years, it was the go-to shopping destination in the region. It became known as being a dangerous place both because of people's actions and the quality of the construction, and newer malls soon attracted customers away from it. The mall was finally closed in 2009. The power was shut off, it was completely abandoned, and demolition began a few years later. While most of the site has now been repurposed as an Amazon fulfillment center, there are some parts of the old mall that remain. They're completely shut off to visitors, though, and the days of walking through the halls are well and truly over. Arous 7, Arous Sea. Vazraz Hidenya Island was once in the middle of the Arous Sea between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, but now, because of the rerouting of the rivers that fed the sea, it has become a peninsula that joins the mainland. If that's not strange enough, the land that once made up the island is restricted, with visitors kept well away for their own safety. That's because in 1954, it was chosen as the site for a new Soviet facility that became known as Arous 7. It was the center of the regime's chemical warfare testing and saw them experiment with anthrax, smallpox, plague, and probably far more things that still haven't been revealed. An accidental release of weaponized smallpox was responsible for 3 deaths on the island in 1971, and it's frightening to think what else was developed there. The facility was finally closed in 1991, but the evacuation was completed so quickly that not everything was fully secured. Storage containers have since developed leaks, and the ground there has the potential to be highly dangerous. Decontamination efforts have improved the situation in recent years, but it's still far from being safe to set foot on. Bangar Fort, India. Built in 1631, Bangar Fort was a present for the ruler's son at the time, but has gone on to be integral to legends of the area. It's about 146 miles away from India's capital, Delhi, and rather than being in an elevated position, it's at the base of the surrounding hills to focus on beauty rather than defense. It now lives in ruins, but tourists can take guided tours around the remains of the palaces, temples, and homes to see the architectural techniques that were used, as well as to get a feel of what it would have been like to live there. There are, however, strict rules as to when people can visit. Specifically, you need a special permit from the government if you plan on entering the site when it's dark. This is because the fort is the only officially recognized haunted place in India, having once been home to wizards, and the threat of death is seen as too great to risk anyone taking their chances. Six Flags, New Orleans. Tapping into the vibe of the city, Jazzland was opened in New Orleans in the year 2000. Covering a 140-acre plot of land, the design of the buildings was based on the French Quarter, but due to difficulties, it was purchased and rebranded as Six Flags New Orleans in 2003. This was already a questionable business decision because it became the least profitable Six Flags park in the country, but in 2005, disaster struck. Hurricane Katrina swept across the city and left the park covered in up to 7 feet of water. Once it receded, the company declared it a lost cause and instead of rebuilding, left it to rust. Despite new ventures exploring the idea of turning it into a park once more, all of these ideas have fallen flat, and the only activity in the past few years has been the filming of movies such as Jurassic World and Percy Jackson. Due to the unstable state of everything, access is strictly limited. Although that hasn't stopped some urban explorers from finding their way in to take some amazing images. The Georgia Nuclear Aircraft Lab, Georgia. When we were beginning to understand the potential applications of nuclear power, large-scale tests were needed to find out how it would affect materials and environments. So several facilities were built to do just that, with one being constructed in the Dawson Forest in Georgia in the 1950s. Known as the Georgia Nuclear Aircraft Lab, it was a joint operation between the Air Force and Lockheed, and essentially consisted of a small, unshielded nuclear reactor with a series of underground bunkers. During a test, workers would retreat to the bunkers and then eradicated the surrounding forest and pieces of military equipment to see what would happen. Unsurprisingly, the trees lost all of their leaves and there were serious consequences to animal life too, so it was decided that the facility would be closed and dismantled in 1971. The underground tunnels were sealed off and a few of the buildings remain, but they've been fenced off and are regularly patrolled to make sure no one gets too close. From an island overrun by poisonous snakes to giant underground crystals, welcome to the 10 most dangerous places on Earth. Tanzania, Lake Natron. How about a lake in northern Tanzania, Africa that turns animals into stone? Yeah, it is pretty dangerous. The scenery here is grim. Bats and birds straight up turned into withered stone statues where they last perched on skeletal branches jutting out from the lake. These are scenes right out of a horror movie. Picture 50 petrified finches all washed up on the lake's shore. The water at Lake Natron reaches up to 60 degrees Celsius or 140 degrees Fahrenheit and is home to nothing except one species of rather resilient fish, a bit of algae, and one tough-as-nails flamingo colony. It must be those long legs that keep them safe. The highly reflective chemical water acts like a glass, so birds fly over this lake and then crash into the lake's surface thinking they are flying through empty space. Not long ago, a pilot was a tragic victim of the same illusion and his crashed helicopter was rapidly easily corroded by the lake's water. The water of Lake Natron is filled with salt, which is dangerous enough by itself, but there is more to it than just salt. This lake contains a chemical called natron, which gives the water a pH level of over 10.5, making it almost as deadly as if it were pure ammonia. I can tell you right now, this is the last lake I'm going to go for a swimming trip in. Venezuela, the Beacon of Maracaibo. Venezuela is a dangerous country, but maybe not for the reasons you may be thinking. Did you know there is a place in Venezuela where each year there are an average of 260 days of lightning storms? Some people refer to the place as Venezuela's everlasting storm. Located in the region where the Catatumbo River meets Lake Maracaibo, you can expect to witness an astonishing 250 flashes of lightning per square kilometer every year. Breaking that down, in a single night during the peak lightning season, you can see roughly 28 flashes a minute. Just imagine trying to set up a city here. How would you install your satellite TV? As of now, scientists blame the rampant electrical storms on wind and the topography of the land. In the 1960s, scientists thought it was because the Catatumbo River has high concentrations of uranium on its bedrock, but recent studies suggest it is caused because the air above the lake is boosted with a lot of methane from oil fields below, while the stunning colors of the lightning strikes is caused by the light passing through dust and moisture. But regardless of why, nothing changes the fact that this is one of the most dangerous places in the world to take a stroll, especially if you're carrying an umbrella. Ethiopia, the Danakil Depression. Ethiopia is a country we recognize as being plagued by famine and drought back in the 90s, but did you know they were also the first country to cultivate coffee? Did you also know that in the northern region of the country, beyond the striking Simien Mountains, lies a depression of rock, fire, and terrible heat? The Danakil Depression is one of the lowest places on Earth, approximately 410 feet below sea level. It's also one of the hottest and most dangerous. Unlike Death Valley in California, where you can hop in your car and drive to the nearest Denny's to cool down with some pancakes and cold water, the nearest AC-cooled restaurant is several thousand miles away from the Danakil Depression. The Danakil Desert is home to a Great Salt Lake, a belching volcano, and countless bubbling pits of multicolored sulfur and acid. This is the most inhospitable terrain imaginable. The Danakil Depression is also thought of as the cradle of life, since the oldest known humanoid fossil was discovered in the region, thought to be 3.2 million years old. If temperatures upwards of 50 degrees Celsius, 122 degrees Fahrenheit, a volcano spitting toxic fumes into the sky, a barren wasteland with no end in sight, and greenish-yellow pits of sulfur don't qualify as one of the dangerous places, I don't know what does. What's the hottest place you've ever been? Let me know in the comments below. And if you are new here, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell before you leave. Brazil. Snake Island. Have you ever seen Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark? You know that scene where Indiana Jones falls into the snake pit. Terrifying, right? It makes your skin crawl. How about an entire island festering with deadly snakes, where there is about one snake per square foot? That equals one slippery serpent with each step. It's Indiana's snake pit times 10,000 million. Worst of all is it's entirely real, just 25 miles from the coast of Brazil. Welcome to Ilha de Queimada Grande, also known as Brazil's Snake Island. This is undoubtedly the most dangerous island on Earth. No human is allowed to step foot on its shores, it is illegal. It is purported that the last crazy guy who got too close was found later adrift, limp in his fishing boat in a pool of his own blood. So, what makes an island of snakes so dangerous and terrifying? Let me introduce you to the deadly golden lancehead pit viper. These snakes are about 1.5 feet long, 46 centimeters, and have enough toxicity in their venom to kill a full-grown person in under an hour. With roughly 2,000 to 4,000 of these vipers scattered around the island, it's one of the most dangerous places for a human to step foot, lest they find themselves snake food. Madagascar. Singi di Bimaraha. Not many people are familiar with Madagascar's true nature. Did you know it is the only place where the bubonic plague still takes people? And in fact, the island is nearly as rich in biodiversity as the Amazon rainforest. It is certainly under equal threat due to human habitation. Yet in the age of extinction, there is one wondrous landmark on the island of Madagascar where life thrives, and where a slip or a poorly placed foot can spell instant death. The place is known as Singi de Bimaraha. Singi means where one cannot walk barefoot in the local Malagasy language. It's a very correct warning. The Singi is a biodiverse paradise built of porous limestone that has dissolved and been shaped by years upon years of water to the point where the towers, walls, and other complexes of stone have been turned jagged and sharp as razors. A jungle trek throughout the Singi can cut your boots to shreds, slice up your gear, and wound your flesh with a single touch. If you were to slip and fall, the intensely sharp walls would certainly rip you to pieces. Then there is the wildlife to contend with. Tropical plants that may poison you, dangerous insects, fanged snakes, its literal cornucopia of reptiles, insects, and other animals, all of which add to the intense danger of the Singi. I can tell you where I won't be going on my next vacation. Did I mention mosquitoes and malaria? Well, this place is full of them. No thanks. Mexico, Naica Crystal Cave. This is the most humid place on Earth. We're all familiar with humidity. It's that uncomfortable, sticky feeling when it's too hot, the slimy wetness in the air that causes us to sweat like we're in a sauna. In fact, humidity is the exact thing in a sauna making you sweat. But how about a place with such high levels of humidity that the fluid inside your lungs literally condenses, causing death within a handful of minutes? This is the dangerous humidity you would experience if you ever found yourself in the giant crystal cave, also known as the Cave of Swords or the Naica Crystal Cave. Founded by miners in the year 2000 underneath the Sierra de Naica mountain in Mexico, the giant crystal cave looks like something out of a science fiction novel. The cave is composed of massive white crystals between 13.1 and 36 feet long, 4 to 11 meters, and up to 3.1 feet, 1 meter thick. It's essentially a 47.1 degrees Celsius chamber crisscrossed with translucent white crystals that look like salt spikes. Oh yeah, and it's so humid that you can die. What was the humidest place you've ever been? Let me know in the comments below. Italy, Mount Vesuvius. Perhaps the most famously dangerous volcano on Earth, Mount Vesuvius looms imposing in the sky beyond Pompeii, the Roman city that was devastated back in AD 79 when the volcano erupted and wiped out over 1,000 people, turning many of them into horrifying stone gargoyles. Not only in Pompeii, but also in Herculaneum, Ablantis, and Stabiae. And while that was over 1,000 years ago, the danger is still real today. There are roughly 3 million people living close enough to be decimated in the case of an eruption from Mount Vesuvius. Scarier still is that an eruption is not an unlikely event. The volcano has been spitting up smoke and lava ever since it first melted Pompeii. There have been roughly 36 major eruptions since. All it will take is one bad day, a bit of a tectonic shift, and Mount Vesuvius could block out the skies with volcanic ash, releasing more thermal energy than the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Despite the Italian government's emergency eruption plan, which includes the immediate evacuation of over 600,000 people, the winds could kick the volcanic ash high into the atmosphere, potentially blocking the sun from the sky all over the globe, causing temperatures to plummet and worldwide crops to fail. The truth is simple and scary. An eruption from Mount Vesuvius could cause global calamity. This makes it one of the world's most dangerous places. Turkey, the Anatolian Fault. Beneath the streets of Istanbul, which is home to over 15 million citizens, lies one of the most precarious fault lines in the world, the North Anatolian Fault, similar in volatility to the San Andreas Fault that lies relatively dormant beneath California. Older folks may remember the 1999 earthquake in Izmit, Turkey, which was labeled the disaster of the century after taking 17,500 lives, but that's far from the end of Turkey's tragic story. On the 17th of August 1999, a 7.4 magnitude earthquake hit Izmit. A tsunami was also created by the earthquake and the roads were destroyed, which led to emergency services being unable to reach the injured. Some kilometers away, the toxic waste dumped at Petkim cracked, exposing waste which had been there for years. Almost 65,000 buildings were destroyed and up to 300,000 people were left homeless. Living on top of one of the most dangerous faults in the world means that sooner or later an earthquake is coming. So this makes Turkey, and especially Istanbul, one of the most dangerous places. Experts guess that the next big earthquake could take at least 30,000 lives and reduce over 2.4 million people to homelessness in the blink of an eye. And those are just educated guesses. The horrible truth is that nobody knows exactly how deadly Turkey's next seismic quake is going to be, nor if it will spurn a massive tsunami that will send waves as big as a house crashing into the coastal city. The only thing scientists know for sure is that, yes, it is coming. The Amazon rainforest. This place should come as no surprise. The Amazon rainforest has been the stuff of explorative dreams for hundreds of years, ever since Europeans first set foot on the South American continent. And while the Amazon is, without a doubt, the single most impressive natural fortress on the planet, home to countless species of wildlife and plants, it is also one of the most dangerous places to step foot. At least it is for a foreigner. Sure, the jungle looks beautiful in photographs and in movies, but have you ever been in the jungle? Like, the real jungle? It's an absolute trap. It's a nightmare. Let's start with the heat. How do you feel about such incredible levels of humidity that you seem to be melting at all times? Not great, right? Now let's add the bugs, and don't forget that with bugs come disease. If a malaria-carrying mosquito doesn't leave you vomiting and delirious in a tree trunk with ants the size of your thumb crawling across your face, you might be lucky and pass away quickly at the tiny fangs of a tarantula. Plus, haven't you seen Naked and Afraid? They almost always send them deep into the rainforest. If a jaguar doesn't get you, a parasite will. Do any of you watch that show? Let me know in the comments below. But wait, there's more. Poisonous frogs, snakes that can swallow you like a juicy little piglet, blood-sucking leeches that will suck you dry as if you've been attacked by a blood-starved vampire, torrential rains that can sink boats and pull you into a sudden river, bacteria-infested water that will give you diarrhea and fever. Oh, and don't forget about dehydration and the occasional croc biting off your foot. Walk through the Amazon jungle, a dangerous adventure not everyone does. Indonesia, Islands of Fire. When it comes to the most dangerous country on Earth to live in, most geologists are going to say the same place, Indonesia. This is truly a land of fire and brimstone. The entirety of Indonesia, which consists of 17,508 islands, 6,000 of which are inhabited, 5 of which are seriously inhabited, Java being the main island and Bali being the most famous, is littered with roughly 130 volcanoes, many of them still active. There were 3 explosions as recently as February, March, and April of 2020. The most notable recent eruption was in November of 2010 when Mount Marapi erupted and took the lives of more than 350 people. Unfortunately enough, living in Indonesia means volcanoes aren't the worst of your problems. Let's talk about earthquakes and tsunamis. 2005 and 2006 saw thousands of lives pass away due to immense earthquakes that shook the Indonesian island, while 2004 saw a massive underwater earthquake give birth to a tsunami that caused over 220,000 people to be either killed or declared missing. It's a tragic part of living in one of the most seismically volatile areas on the planet. Unfortunate yet again, there is likely no end in sight to the chaos caused to the Indonesian people by their land of fire and earthquakes. Before you pack your bags and head out for a vacation for fun and sun in Bali, you may want to reconsider lest you find yourself buried in volcanic ash. Thanks for watching. Which of these terrifyingly dangerous places would you dare to visit? Which do you think possess the biggest threats to the world? From the lost Ark of the Covenant to ancient shrines that appear to predate their religion, here are 10 very mysterious religious artifacts. The Spear of Destiny. In the Christian religion, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ of Nazareth is one of the most important moments of the Bible. One key moment came several hours into the crucifixion when a Roman soldier pierced Jesus' side or heart with a lance or spear, depending on the version of the story. The weapon became known as the Holy Lance, or the Spear of Destiny. Many believe that the spear possesses magical powers, and that its owner is the only person who can control the world. There are even tales of notorious and honorable world leaders alike taking possession of the spear as ways to either seize power and end brutal warfare and dictatorships. Included among the rulers rumored to be connected with the spear at one point or another are Charlemagne, Holy Roman Emperor Frederick I Barbarossa, US World War II General George S. Patton, and Alaric, King of the Visigoths, just to name a few. It is said that when an individual parts with the spear, their life ends shortly thereafter. There are several artifacts that people have claimed to be the authentic Spear of Destiny, including a spear General Patton retrieved, a 7th century spear called the Vienna Lance, which the Western Roman Empire may have used in ceremonies, and fragments of yet another spear, which belonged to St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican City. The Blood of St Januarius. St. Januarius was a 3rd century Roman Catholic bishop in Italy who died a martyr for his faith and became the patron saint of Naples. His bones and blood are preserved at the Cathedral of the Assumption of Mary. His blood is kept in a dried state in an ampule, which is held in a sealed area of the church. It's used in a special ceremony 3 times a year, and on many of these occasions, the centuries-old blood unexplainably liquefies. While the Catholic Church does not officially recognize this as a miracle, many consider it to be one. The blood has also liquefied during various papal visits. Sometimes, the blood fails to liquefy, and devout Catholics see it as an omen for disaster, such as war, famine, or disease. When the blood remained dry in January 2016, Monsignor Vincenzo de Gregorio suggested that people pray instead of worry. The Shroud of Turin. After Jesus died on the cross, his body was prepared for burial according to contemporary religious customs, which included draping a shroud over him. While the body of Christ has never actually been discovered, a relic called the Shroud of Turin is said to be his actual burial cloth. It first appeared in France during the 14th century, and was relocated to northern Italy in 1578, where it remains today. One of the alleged proofs that this centuries-old linen cloth is indeed the shroud in question is that it bears an image of a man resembling Jesus. Experts have dedicated hundreds of thousands of hours of research and analysis to the shroud, which remains a hotly debated and controversial artifact to this day. In 1988, scientists radiocarbon dated the item back to the Middle Ages, which raised obvious questions regarding its authenticity. While the argument ended there for many who trust science, others reserved their skepticism in favor of the benefit of the doubt, and some adamantly argue that the shroud is genuine. Almost anyone hoping to examine the relic firsthand is out of luck, as it's kept in a bulletproof glass case inside a casket at the Turin Cathedral, and is only brought out on special occasions at the Pope's discretion. And when the shroud is displayed, be prepared to wait a while. In 2015, over 2 million people lined up for a quick glance at it. The Ark of the Covenant. The location of the Ark of the Covenant is perhaps one of the greatest religious mysteries. Biblical accounts say that it was a large gilded case made of wood made to house the stone tablets where the 10 Commandments were written. It was described as a large chest that must be carried by at least 2 people, and it had 2 large golden angels, so it would have been hard to miss. Not only would it have been a valuable object on its own, but the Ark is also linked to several miracles. This handsome object was the work of the Israelites, who crafted it approximately 3,000 years ago. The Ark was carried towards the Promised Land, and in the Old Testament, it is said to have cleared poisonous animals from their path and even stopped the flow of the Jordan River so the people could cross. One of the strongest claims is that before Jerusalem was sacked, the Ark had been sent to Ethiopia and hidden in the St. Mary of Zion Cathedral. The only person allowed to see it is the appropriately named guardian of the Ark. It is such a holy object that a mere human cannot look at such a holy object without suffering the consequences. Other churches and temples around the world claim to possess the Ark, but none of them have been tested for authenticity because that would be inappropriate. The first Buddhist shrine. The Maya Devi Temple in Lumbini, Nepal, is said to mark the birthplace of Siddhartha Gautama, better known as Buddha. It became one of the Buddhist religion's most sacred sites by 249 BC. In 1992, excavations revealed ruins dating back at least 2,200 years, which matched the description of where Emperor Ashoka laid a stone in the 3rd century BC. Even more recently, archaeologists discovered an old, wooden structure underneath the present-day central shrine. Its design was remarkably similar to the building that stands on top of it, suggesting that it was a holy Buddhist structure, and it had a clay floor that bears evidence of heavy foot traffic, perhaps from worshippers. Scientists place the wooden shrine's construction date more than a century before the most commonly accepted date for Buddha's birth, meaning that religion may have gotten a much earlier start than many believe. Medal of Our Lady of Graces. Also called the Miraculous Medal, the Medal of Our Lady of Graces is a pendant that was originally manufactured in 1832 based on a design by Saint Catherine Labouré after she witnessed apparitions of the Virgin Mary in Paris, France. During the third of these visions, which started in 1830, Mary told Saint Catherine Labouré that people who wear her medal, especially around their neck, would receive great graces. The medals were distributed throughout Paris, and according to the story, those who wore it began receiving blessings almost immediately. Soon enough, everyone wanted one, and devout Christians clamored for their copy of the Miraculous Medal. An 1836 inquiry into Saint Catherine Labouré's visions determined that the apparitions were genuine. She was eventually canonized. Although she passed away 143 years ago, her remains are nearly perfectly intact and are on display at the Chapel of Our Lady of the Miraculous Medal in Paris. In addition to the apparitions she experienced, the incorrupt state of her body contributed to her sainthood. To this day, the model is popular throughout the world, and many still claim that it delivers special graces to them. The Holy Right Hand. Hungary's first ruler, King Stephen, died in 1038. His body was later resumed for relocation purposes due to fears that someone had desecrated his remains, or during a canonical investigation, depending on which version of the story you believe. Those who examined King Stephen's remains were shocked when they noticed that his right hand was incorrupt, while the rest of his body had decayed. Before reburying the king, his right hand was removed, and it remains in an allegedly uncorrupted state centuries later. The arm is kept at the Basilica of St. Stephen's Treasury in Budapest. It's used in an annual ceremony on August 20th. While many see the hand as a true religious artifact, others have called its authenticity into question over the years, citing inconsistencies regarding the hand's positioning and its lack of a ring, which King Stephen always wore. Mithraism Sanctuary. The rise of Christianity in the West is said to have coincided with the rise of another monotheistic religion called Mithraism. However, unlike Christianity, Mithraism is not well documented. Experts therefore know very little about it, and have relied primarily on the ruins of Mithraic temples to glean the limited information they do have. In 2016, archaeologists excavated an ancient Mithraic sanctuary on the island of Corsica near France. They uncovered many artifacts, including pictures depicting Mithra sacrificing a bull. Some items, including the altar, were damaged, and while ancient Christians cannot be directly connected to the damage, researchers believe that there was tension between the two religions. Roman Emperor Theodosius I outlawed the practice of Mithraism within the empire, which may partially explain why its devotees practiced in secrecy. The True Cross. The cross that was used in the crucifixion of Jesus Christ is, without a doubt, one of the most important symbols in the history of Christianity. Yet, nobody seems to know with certainty if the true cross still exists. Rumors and claims regarding fragments of the cross have surfaced from time to time, but the authenticity of any relics has yet to be confirmed. According to legend, Saint Helena, the mother of Constantine the Great, discovered the cross during her pilgrimage to the Holy Land in 326. Over the following centuries, fragments of the purported true cross were sold as relics. French theologian John Calvin boldly called the authenticity of true cross claims into question when he pointed out that the thousands of pieces of it that were known to exist would fill an entire ship. He's not the only one to believe that the true cross may not be real. Many non-Catholic Christians have even asserted this claim. Meanwhile, many devout Catholics argue that the true cross possesses a material indestructibility that gave it the power to be forever broken down into more pieces without ever running out of material. The Holy Grail. According to most legends, the Holy Grail is the cup that Jesus used in the Last Supper when he made communion with the 12 disciples before Judas betrayed him, resulting in his crucifixion. One of the many stories surrounding the Holy Grail states that a man named Joseph of Arimathea used the chalice to collect sweat and blood from Christ after he was crucified. The legend continues to say that Joseph was imprisoned for expressing his faith in Christ. Following his release, he took the Grail to Britain with him, and it was subsequently somehow lost to history. To this day, the search for the Holy Grail remains one of the greatest quests of all time. Many believe that this artifact is the key to immortality, or that people can be healed or gifted with eternal wisdom just by touching it. Others seek it for its historic and perhaps monetary value. Like many Christian relics, the Holy Grail's authenticity is largely disputed and is accompanied by debates regarding what it even is. However, to many, a relic's physical state is less important than who and what it represents. Thank you all for watching. Which of these doors would you rather open? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all of our newest videos. See you next time. From futuristic straddling buses to missiles under the ice, here are 10 sneak peeks at some of history's craziest abandoned secret technologies. Boeing Y1. Imagine a plane that looked like a normal airliner, but with a deadly twist. That was the thinking behind Boeing's YAL-1, which was developed in the early 21st century. Taking the body of a 747-400F, the US military decided to arm it with a coil or chemical oxygen iodine laser. Equipped with a big nose through which the laser would be aimed, the YAL-1 was intended to intercept enemy missiles. After an initial flight in 2002, a test involving what's described as a low-power laser was conducted in 2007. 2010 saw a more powerful blast deployed, which took down a couple of projectiles. So far, so good. However, the project was cancelled in 2011 and the plane itself scrapped in 2014. Former Secretary of Defense Robert Michael Gates believed the idea wasn't viable due to the overall range of the coil, plus the billions of dollars needed to keep a group of YAL-1s in the air. They hoped to have a devastating weapon that could shoot down missiles. Sadly for Boeing, that dream got mothballed. Instead, it was the YAL-1 that got shot down, or at least that's what they want us to believe. China's Transit Elevated Bus. In 2016, news emerged of a Chinese bus that looked like something out of Star Trek. Its mission was to boldly go to the country's congested road network, providing a practical solution owing to its shape and height. What does that mean? Well, the TEB, Transit Elevated Bus, is shaped like a movable tunnel for cars. Not only does it transport passengers from A to B, it does so while off the tarmac, which is where the straddling comes in. Traffic simply drives beneath the bus so it doesn't hold things up. Pretty neat, huh? Well, not quite. It seemed promising and generated more buzz than a swarm of bees landing on a chainsaw. The sneak peeks at this wonder bus went viral, but sadly, the tantalizing glimpse of the future did not become a reality. Aside from alleged financial irregularities, where multiple people were charged with fraud and embezzlement, a big engineering problem emerged. TEB couldn't handle corners too well. Plus, while it was turning corners, it still managed to block traffic, who weren't going to play stuntman and drive under a sideways bus. The project was scrapped, with congestion surviving to fight another day. Seems like the future of elevated transportation is still on wings or on rails. Hiller VZ-1 Pawnee. Big things come in small packages, but is that the case when it comes to warfare? There's seemingly no shortage of tiny drones and unmanned aerial vehicles that can cause death and destruction these days, but back in the 1950s, they didn't have airborne robots like that. One thing that they did have, on the other hand, albeit briefly, was the Hiller VZ-1 Pawnee. It was a flying platform where the pilot stood upright while contra-rotating fans lifted them skywards. Now that's a $10 word right there. Contra-rotating means parts built around an axis which rotate in different directions. So if one propeller turns clockwise, the other one turns counterclockwise. Beginning in 1953, the US Army partnered with the Hiller Aircraft Company to bring designer Charles Horton Zimmerman's concept to life. How on earth do you steer this thing? The pilot would have to shift their body weight to change direction. Sounds a little weird, like a flying unicycle, but actually the Pawnee didn't do too badly. Its downfall was that it was too small and didn't go high enough for the military's top brass's liking. The VZ-1 only reached a height of around 30 feet with a less than awe-inspiring top speed of 16 miles per hour. Now, it's just a curiosity, a drone with a pilot from a simpler time. Would you ever think about going up in one of these? It looks too dangerous for me personally. Be sure to let me know down in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe. NASA Helios. A solar-powered air glider? Sounds crazy, no? As it turns out, NASA took a detour and began channeling their efforts into air travel during the late 1990s and early 2000s. Of course, they had plenty of experience in designing rockets for ultra-fast travel through the air, but that was so they could get beyond our sky and into outer space. The unmanned Helios project was more modest by comparison, but no less ambitious in scope. With a 247-foot, 75-meter wingspan, it resembled a futuristic take on one of the old Wright brothers' planes. What did NASA want to do with it? The clue is in the name, Helios, coming from the legendary sun god. This cutting-edge mode of transportation was powered by solar energy using an experimental fuel cell system, and the agency wanted it to fly as high as 100,000 feet, 30.5 kilometers. It never achieved this in the end, but with a record-breaking final tally of 97,000 feet, 30 kilometers, it got very close. Unfortunately, it only ever made it 4 years before disaster struck. In 2003, NASA engineers were testing it in Hawaii when it malfunctioned and took a dive into the Pacific Ocean, 10 miles, 16 kilometers west of the island of Kauai. Anyone think it could still be down there in the depths, plotting revenge on the humans who crashed it? Well, the scientists did recover most of it, so unfortunately for science fiction fans, there's not much mystery surrounding its final flight. Tupolev Tu-144. In the world of supersonic passenger jets, the relatively unknown airplane was actually the first. But what happened to it? Many people know about the Concorde jet, which let regular folks fly across the Atlantic in only about 3 hours. It might have stolen all the attention as a supersonic passenger plane, but there were other players in the game. The most notable and first attempt at a commercial supersonic jet was the Tupolev Tu-144, the USSR's rival to the Concorde. Though it looked similar, underneath the body panels, it was designed totally differently. Even so, some news outlets and people couldn't help nicknaming it the Concordski. Tragically, the Tu-144 entered the history books for all the wrong reasons. It won respect from the aviation industry but was not practical enough to succeed. This was shockingly demonstrated via not one but 2 fatal crashes. One in 1973 where the Tu-144 broke up and hit the village of Goussonville, France. The other disaster happened after a fire led to an emergency landing in 1978. 2 flight engineers lost their lives. The Russians tried flying it as a passenger plane, but technical faults, the incredible noise generated by the Tu-144's afterburners, and the increasing price of oil meant it got grounded after just 55 scheduled passenger flights. Only 17 copies of the plane were ever made. A few flights for military purposes continued occasionally into the 1980s, including in space shuttle training for would-be cosmonauts. In the 1990s, one flew again a few times as part of a research project with NASA funding, but by 1999 the project was cancelled due to budget constraints. That was the last time, likely ever, that a Tu-144 ever touched the sky. Rockwell X30. Elon Musk and his company SpaceX may be doing their part trying to make commercial space travel a reality, but they are just the latest in a line of companies aiming to get people journeying beyond our atmosphere regularly. Back in the 1980s, President Ronald Reagan talked about the need for fast and efficient space travel using the description "a new Orient Express." Now, aside from its status as a murder scene thanks to Agatha Christie's famous book, the Orient Express was the ultimate in luxury travel. Sadly, when it came to the Rockwell X30, there was barely any luxury to be found. The X30 was America's attempt to create a NASP, or National Aerospace Plane. In 1993, the project, partly run by Rockwell International, was killed off 7 years after work had started, and it doesn't take a master detective to work out the cause. This SSTO, or single stage to orbit spacecraft, was designed for 2 passengers. Whereas a normal space shuttle will burn up a ton of fuel and jettison parts, as well as rocket boosters along the way, the X30 was intended as a single unit that would get up there, get back, and be used again for future trips. The goal was to go from Washington to Tokyo in a mere couple of hours. Take that, jet airplanes! Unfortunately, the money and the tech was not there to get the project off the ground, literally and figuratively. Project Storm Fury. Imagine defeating the most powerful winds Mother Nature throws at us, through science. Now the world has some very smart people, but sometimes they do stuff that sounds a little out there. Sometimes you've got to take risks in order to get results, but trying to take on tropical cyclones by flying planes into them sounds crazy to me, and that idea, dubbed Project Storm Fury, did not take off. The weather-weakening scheme, running between 1962 and 1983, involved US aircraft depositing silver iodide into the heart of the cyclone. Now, I was confused when I first learned this. Why throw iodide into a natural weather phenomenon? It was based on the idea that the compound might cause heat to leave the water deep inside the storm cell of the hurricane. Apparently, this would widen the eye of the storm, which would make it weaker. This would save many thousands of lives in a natural disaster, so the theory went. The process is known as cloud seeding. As it turned out, the experimenters were on the wrong track, and the silver iodide did not prove itself a useful or effective solution. Also, as we all know, storms are unpredictable. The tropical storm test cases sometimes weakened without any outside intervention, which left experts scratching their heads. Storm Fury was washed down the drain, but it did provide some interesting data for meteorologists, who took the results and used them as a basis to predict the movements of future storms, including the ones we have today. Unk. It sounds menacing and mysterious, but what is it? Truth is, it was a big deal back in the late 1980s, though it was never finished. Built by Russia's Institute for High Energy Physics, it nearly became the world's biggest particle accelerator. That's right, before the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland, there was this massive device. Before scientists discovered evidence of the famous Higgs boson particle, which they think could be responsible for gravity, in 2012, Projects like this tried to pin it down with high energy and massive magnetic fields. It runs for approximately 30 miles, 48 kilometers under the town of Protvino, and while abandoned, it's still a popular destination for adventurers looking for a unique photo op. What you'll find down there is a huge tunnel network. Plans were afoot for UNC to have its own train system, which tells you something about the scale of this project. Despite being out of use, the site needs to be maintained regularly. Groundwater can accumulate, and the Russian authorities have to pump it out regularly, at no small cost. The end of the Soviet Union spelled disaster for any hopes of Higgs boson-based research on the Russian side. There just wasn't enough money left, and in 1996 the plug was pulled, leaving Switzerland to find the elusive particle just 16 years later. Stanley R. Mickelson Complex. Plenty of projects got mothballed in development, but this one actually opened for operation, only to be closed 24 hours later. What happened with the Stanley R. Mickelson Safeguard Complex in North Dakota? It's a true tale of missiles and mishaps. Stanley Raymond Mickelson himself was a U.S. Army Air Defense Command general who passed away in 1966. But, in his honor, the Army created a giant missile array in the middle of nowhere. Work on the complex started in the early 1970s, but right as it was in the middle of construction, in 1972, the US signed the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty with the Soviets. The United States Safeguard program was designed to launch anti-ballistic missiles in the event of an attack on their missile silos. If the USSR had launched a strike against the United States, they would have been intercepted by 30 Spartan missiles and 70 Sprint missiles, which had a shorter range. The complex went into operation in 1975. The following year, it went to full operational capacity. After just a single day, a mere 24 hours, the place was shut down. Talk about an anticlimax. Though now the complex is mostly degraded after 45 years out of service, there is an interesting follow-up happening right now. Part of the complex has been put up for auction this year. That's a little bit terrifying, to be honest. It seems like something a supervillain would like to get his hands on. Who do you think would buy a place like this, and for what purpose? Leave a comment with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe because there's just one more unbelievable piece of secret tech out there. Project Iceworm. The scene? Northwest Greenland. The year? 1959. What happened? Well, if you believed the news reports, it was just the United States attempting to build a research center called Camp Century. It was talked about as a place where soldiers would go to learn about extreme environments and push mankind further in the process. There was a lot of publicity for the new center, which was like a city under the ice. It was so wholesome that even a pair of Boy Scouts were sent to Greenland for a tour and an internship. Just one little problem, Camp Century was a distraction. What the military really had in mind was a 52,000 square mile nuclear missile storage area named Project Iceworm. Tunnels were being created beneath the ice cap to house 2,100 silos and 600 nuclear weapons, which would be moved around between the different silos using rail cars. Why all the movement? To keep the Soviet Union guessing as to their location. The Cold War was starting in earnest, and Project Iceworm was set to make it a whole lot colder. Ultimately, however, the dream melted. Snow and ice had a nasty habit of moving around, so the place was not stable. The reactor that powered Camp Century didn't work right. Plus, never mind the Russians, the American team were busy arguing amongst themselves over what to do. The truth came out in 1997 thanks to the Danish government. Why the Danes? Because they were aware of the secret project since Greenland is a territory of Denmark. They declassified all the information about the secret plan 30 years after Project Iceworm was shut down. While the facility was closed down forever, it may be making a weird, unwelcome comeback. Global warming will apparently lead to the melting of the snow in the surrounding area, which could exhume all the radioactive waste left behind from its frozen tomb. Imagine tons of radiation from the 1960s being released back into the natural world. It's the kind of thing that keeps you up at night for sure. From gravity-defying waterfalls to magnetic hills, here are 10 places where gravity doesn't seem to exist. Hoover Dam, Nevada, USA. Rivers flow downhill, water drops to the ground when you pour it from the top of a building. Everything obeys the law of gravity. That's what you were taught, right? But is that always the case? There's a dam that might be violating the law of gravity. The Hoover Dam is majestically situated in the Black Canyon of the Colorado River, right on the border between Nevada and Arizona, USA. Built in the 1930s to supply electricity to California, this dam is known for several mind-blowing facts. Its magnificent height of 726 feet, 221.3 meters, made it the world's tallest dam when it was built. Its power plant was the world's largest hydroelectric station from 1939 to 1949, and the second highest bridge in America runs along the top of the dam. Although Hoover has been relegated to seconds as it's become the second tallest dam in the US, it's a great tourist attraction due to its shocking, gravity-defying feature. Tourists that visit the Hoover Dam and pour water or soda over the edge of its over 700-foot, 213-meter barrier notice that water flows upwards instead of downwards. Amazing, right? This occurrence leaves us with lots of questions. Does Hoover defy gravity? If the dam has an anti-gravity field, why doesn't it send other items flying upwards? One fascinating thing is that there's gravity along the perimeter of the Black Canyon. So, what causes the upward flow of water when poured from that height? Scientists believe that the probable cause is heavy wind around the dam. The height and shape of the structure cause an updraft, which is too strong for water to fall downward. This explanation is quite logical, if we must admit. Well, if you ever plan on visiting this historical dam, be sure to experiment with some liquid. Just be careful not to litter. Mystery Spot, Santa Cruz, California. Just like its name implies, the mystery spot hides an inexplicable mystery. This unusual house is situated on a 150-foot circular area in the forest outside Santa Cruz. In 1939, a group of surveyors discovered the spot by noticing that its magnetic field had irregularities. George Prather opened the area to the public in 1940. The mystery spot has become a popular tourist site in the USA. If you visit the building, you'd walk on it in a tilted manner, stand at a seemingly impossible angle, and see objects that look like they're rolling uphill. Nevertheless, some people say the house was built at an angle, and what you see at Mystery Spot is an optical illusion. But whichever narrative about this building is true, one paramount thing still holds. It makes gravity seem non-existent. Reverse Waterfall, Faroe Island, Kingdom of Denmark. Just when we thought that nothing could beat the Hoover Dam, there's another interesting discovery that will make you think twice about gravity. You might think that liquid flowing upward from a bottle is awesome. How about a waterfall? In between Scotland and Iceland, there's a waterfall that flows upwards. The waterfall shoots up, a magnificent sight to behold. You can find this strange phenomenon in the Atlantic Ocean at Faroe Island, but just like the Hoover Dam, the wind powers the water to flow upwards. Any water that flows downward is caught by the wind and pushed back up. Do you want to visit the reverse waterfall? Take a trip to Faroe Island and you can enjoy the sight. Maybe when we can travel again, if ever. Hudson Bay Area, Canada. You might think that an area of 150 feet without gravity is spectacular. How about an area that's more than 1 million kilometers? In the 1960s, scientists discovered that the Hudson Bay Area in Canada has less gravity than the rest of the world. You won't float here or have water flowing upwards, but you definitely weigh less. The fascinating thing is that it took scientists 40 years to figure out why there's less gravity in the area. It turns out that you can trace that reason back to what you studied in physics. Gravity occurs as a result of mass. Any part of the Earth with more density will have more gravity, and any part with less density will have reduced gravity. Do you remember the movie Ice Age and how the Earth was covered in ice? 10,000 years ago, during the Ice Age, Canada's experience was a bit different. A huge glacier called the Laurentide ice sheet covered the country, but that wasn't enough. The heavy ice sheet used the opportunity to squeeze the Earth's rocks and hold it down. When Laurentide finally melted, the Earth tried to bounce back. Unfortunately, it had been repressed for so long, so the planet's rock in Hudson Bay ended up not having the same mass as the rest of the world. With its reduced mass came reduced gravity. If you need instant weight loss, visit the Hudson Bay area and you'll see the number on the scale go down. Magnetic Hill, Leh Ladakh, India. Right in Leh Kargil-Baltic National Highway of India, there's a hill that might have magnetic properties, which helps it to defy the law of gravity. The route stretches for about 30 kilometers from Leh to Kargil. You would see the road going uphill, but if you turn off your engine and put the car in neutral, the vehicle will start moving on its own. It can even move uphill at a speed of 20 kilometers per hour without a running engine. Some people believe that the hilly highway has magnetic properties that push cars uphill, while others attribute the uphill movement to supernatural elements. A few people think the road is an optical illusion. The road is actually going downhill, but the surrounding hills and areas layout makes you see it otherwise. Whatever the case may be, you can take a trip to the highway to experience this strange phenomenon. You'd also save tons of fuel in the process. St. Ignace Mystery Spot, Michigan, United States. There's yet another mystery spot in Michigan, United States. In the 1950s, some surveyors were exploring the place when their equipment stopped working in a 300-foot circular area. The area is the mystery spot. If you go into the cabin constructed there, you can balance on a wall and exchange height with another person. You can also stand in a tilted fashion without falling. Although people attribute these gravity-defying feats to an optical illusion, they're still fun and amazing to behold. Mysterious Place, Gujarat, India. Tulsi Sham in the Gir Forest National Park is famous for its 3,000-year-old Krishna temple, a hot water spring with healing powers, and its anti-gravity hill. Like the Indian National Highway, if you set your car on neutral and turn off the engine at the base of the hill, it will slowly creep uphill at a speed of 20 kilometers per hour. Residents claim that the road leads to heaven, which causes vehicles to be pulled upwards. In reality, this road situated on the border of Junagadh and Imreli district is an optical illusion. Rather than going uphill, the road slopes downhill, but its structure and horizontal line tricks your brain into thinking that it's uphill. Oregon Vortex, House of Mystery, Oregon, United States. The Oregon Vortex is in Sardine Creek in Gold Hill, Oregon. Located within a 165-foot radius, it does not just defy gravity, it also bends light and alters mass. But before buildings were constructed in the area, Native Americans called the place the Forbidden Land. Horses also refused to go through the area. The Old Gray Mining Company built an outpost in the Oregon Vortex in 1904. The building slid from its foundation and stayed at an odd angle. William McCullough rediscovered the building in 1914 and convinced his friend Lister, an engineer and geologist, to research the phenomena. The Oregon Vortex and its House of Mystery were opened to tourists in 1930, and it's the earliest recorded gravitational spot in the United States. After Lister died in 1959, his wife sold the place to Ernie and Irene Cooper. Their daughter and grandson have been managing the place ever since. If you visit the Oregon Vortex, you'll see objects rolling uphill. You can also exchange height with someone else. You could appear taller or shorter than the person depending on where you stand. If you walk around, you may need to hold the walls as you feel like you're losing your balance. There's also a broom that stands upright no matter where you place it. A professor from the University of Oregon visited the area in 1966 and claimed that the occurrences were as a result of optical illusions. In 1999, two UC Berkeley researchers added that visitors experience a different reality in Oregon Vortex because the brain's visual processing uses spatial frames of reference to create what they see. However, tourists think differently. They've used several instruments to measure the angle and tilt, and they say there's no trickery involved. Spook Hill, Lake Wales, Florida. Just like in other places, cars put on neutral appear to roll back up the hill. All you have to do is put your car on the white line indicated by a signboard and take it out of gear. Spook Hill is located in Lake Wales Ridge, Florida. About 3 million years ago, the Sand and Milestone Hills in the area were islands. According to legend, an Indian village that lived there was constantly attacked by an alligator. Their warrior chief killed the gator in a huge battle that created Lake Wales. Years later, male riders noticed that their horses were laboring on what appeared to be downhill. They named the place Spook Hill. When the road was paved, cars still moved uphill even when the ignition was off. Many people claim that this hill located on 5th Street is only an optical illusion. The changes in elevation make it look like you're at the hill's bottom when you're actually at the top. Golden Boulder, Myanmar, Asia. A large rock hanging precariously from a cliff with half of it threatening to fall off should not exist. However, the enormous granite boulder, Kyaiktayo Pagoda, has been perched at the top of a cliff in Mon State, Myanmar for 2,500 years. With a 25-foot height and a 50-foot circumference, this boulder is hard to miss. According to legend, Buddha gave a strand of his hair to a hermit. The hermit gave the hair to a king who wished that the hair be enshrined in a boulder. The king went on to pull the rock from the ocean using magic. He then found the perfect place for the golden boulder and built a pagoda where the hair was enshrined. Tourists and pilgrims visit the pagoda regularly. Some light candles, chant mantras, and give offerings to Buddha. A few place their head on the rock praying. People believe that if you complete the pilgrimage to the pagoda 3 times in a year, you'd have great fortune and tremendous wealth. Now the site is the 3rd most important Buddhist pilgrimage site in Myanmar, also known as Burma. The pagoda gets the most pilgrims on the full moon day of Tabong in March when 90,000 candles are lit and the golden rock glitters from the sky. So, which of these seemingly gravity-defying areas do you prefer? Would you rather visit the Hoover Dam, take a pilgrimage to the Golden Boulder, or lose weight in the Hudson Bay area? Maybe you're inclined to visit one of the mystery spots or the gravitational hills. Whichever you choose, you're sure to have fun and marvel at the sight. From giant hairy spiders that could eat a small bird to strange mutant flying scorpions, here are the 10 weirdest insects in the world. Giant water bug. The giant water bug is one of the biggest insects that I'd never want to meet. The North American species can grow to be 2.5 inches, 6 centimeters long, which might not be much to you, but it's certainly big in the insect world. South American giant water bugs can grow to be 4 inches, 10 centimeters long, and that is even more impressive. These weird bugs can be found lurking below the surface of lakes and ponds where they have a tendency to nibble on the toes of unsuspecting swimmers. This is why another name for giant water bugs is toe biters. They cannot get enough of human feet. Giant water bugs can fly, despite their long and weird bodies, which are not aerodynamic at all. But what's even weirder is that they carry their eggs on their backs. What happens is the female will deposit her eggs on the back of her mate. The male giant water bug will then carry the eggs for about 2 weeks until they hatch. During this time, he ferociously protects them from predators, brings them to the surfaces so that they can get oxygen, and he moves water around his body in such a way to keep the eggs oxygenated and hydrated. Now that's a great devoted father right there. Water bugs will also play dead when they are threatened. It's a behavior known as thanatosis. If you were to ever pick up a giant water bug, it will probably look dead. But don't be fooled, it's just waiting to wake up and bite you, preferably somewhere on your feet. Just be careful around these big insects, especially in unfamiliar bodies of fresh water. Will you be looking twice next time you go barefoot in a lake or a swamp? I know I will. Let me know if you've ever had an unpleasant aquatic bug encounter in the comments below. Titan beetle. Meet the world's biggest beetle, with a name to match. This is the Titan beetle, and it can grow to be almost 7 inches, 18 centimeters long. That's big enough to stretch from the tip of your middle finger to the bottom of your palm, unless you are also a giant and have particularly large hands. Titan beetles live in the tropical rainforests of South America, specifically in Colombia, Peru, Brazil, the Guianas, and Ecuador. And while they are extremely large, they aren't actually aggressive. They do have jaws that are strong enough to break a pencil or cut your flesh, but they won't typically attack you first. You just need to be careful of their pinchers when you pick them up. Like most beetles, the Titan beetle males will fly around in the humid season looking for mates, following around pheromones in search of romance and to reproduce. It's their version of cuffing season. But one of the weirdest things about Titan beetles is that once they are grown, they may actually stop eating. These giant bugs may only eat as larvae, eating decaying wood beneath the ground. Because they only spend a few weeks as adults and scientists don't know much about the insect's biology, some scientists suggest they simply don't eat at all while in their adult forms. They get all their calories when they are larvae, then just survive off of their surplus stores of energy as adults, trying only to reproduce. This happens until they run out of energy and eventually die. There are all types of animals out there, and some of them have strange ways to focus on what nature intended them to do. Scorpion fly. What is weirder than a scorpion-fly hybrid? I can't think of much. This weird bug is known as the scorpion fly, and it has a strange combination of the characteristics of both a fly and a scorpion. It almost looks like a wasp with a curling scorpion stinger. But the weirdest thing is that even though the scorpion fly males do have tails, they don't actually sting with them. It looks exactly like a scorpion tail, but it's purely a visual effect. The bulging end of the tail is actually the reproductive organ of the male. It's not a stinger. It can't hurt you, it's only used to fertilize the eggs of the female scorpion fly after the male has courted her using gifts of food and pheromones. Female scorpion flies do not have the scorpion-like tail. However, both males and females of these species kind of look like wasps. They have yellow and black wings and pointy noses. Females lay their eggs inside of rotting wood, and the larvae that come out weeks later look a lot like caterpillars and grow by eating whatever dead insects they find in the wood. In order to become an adult, the little caterpillar babies must go through metamorphosis. There's no doubt about it, these animals are confusing, but a swarm of them would terrify anyone. What do you think? Would you be scared if 100 or more scorpion flies started charging at you in an aerial swarm? Let me know how you'd react in the comment section below, but first, don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. There are more impressive fact videos coming out all the time, and you won't want to miss them. Assassin bug. The assassin bug is one of the weirdest insects in the world. It's an insane bug that you have probably never heard of. Some might even call this creature absurd. It's a fearless and ferocious bug that sucks its prey dry and then dresses in their corpses like a morbid mad scientist. The assassin bug impales its victims, drains them of their internal organs, then attaches the corpse of the slain onto its back. A young assassin bug will literally craft a backpack of dead ants and other insects to show how fearsome it is. And not just one or two bugs, it will build up a giant shield of dozens of dead creatures and carry them around. This gives the assassin bug the appearance of a weird boss from some creepy video game. Not only does a backpack of dead bugs work as a deterrent for those other creatures who might want to eat the assassin bug, it also works as armor. It's hard to eat something that has 17 victims piled on its back. The assassin bug's favorite thing to eat and wear are ants, termites, and bees. These things are absolutely fearless, and to make things even stranger, there are supposedly 7,000 species of assassin bugs all over the world, which means there's a good chance you could find one to make into a pet. Would that scare off potential intruders the way a guard dog would? I don't know, but I'd like to find out. Giant burrowing cockroach. Everyone hates cockroaches. There is nothing worse than opening the utensil drawer and finding a hive of smelly cockroaches scurrying off deeper into your cabinets. It's one of the most revolting experiences one can have in their lifetime, which makes it even more unpleasant to talk about the weirdest and heaviest cockroach in the world. It's known as the giant burrowing cockroach, and yes, it actually hisses at you. The giant burrowing cockroach will build intricate nests to protect itself and hide out from predators. Interestingly, it also gives birth to live babies, which is unusual for insects. And most importantly, it's seriously huge. It's only the second largest cockroach in the world by length, but it beats all others in terms of weight. Giant burrowing cockroaches typically burrow into deep soil. They can create labyrinths beneath the soil up to 20 feet, 6 meters long. And at the very end of these weird tunnels, cockroaches set up little apartments. They actually leave their young inside these burrows and take care of them for up to 6 months until they're ready to fend for themselves. They are one of the most conscientious insect parents on Earth. They take such good care of their young babies that it's hard to think about stomping on one of these bugs just because it grosses you out. Don't forget, cockroaches are a part of the world's ecosystem too. Brazilian tree hopper. The Brazilian tree hopper is another weird bug, and it's got this particularly strange appendage on its head, one that has scientists scratching their heads trying to figure out what it's for. You see, the Brazilian tree hopper has 6 legs and a crown in the shape of 4 spheres. That's right, this strange insect lives in the Amazon rainforest and has one of the coolest hats of any insect, a ball hat. It has 2 sets of balls on its head that look like a TV antenna of some sort. The balls on top of the tree hopper's head are believed to have evolved as a kind of illusion, meant to distract predators who are trying to bite the bug in the face. Rather than biting its actual face, they will bite its distraction balls above its head so that it can get away. According to a report from Science Focus, most scientists believe the ball structures on the insect's head actually mimic a parasitic fungus known for infiltrating the bodies of ants and eventually killing them. This leaves the Brazilian tree hopper pretty safe, as no predator wants to eat such a dangerous fungus. So it's a disguise, and a pretty impressive one at that. Atlas moth. I'm not sure if Atlas moths are cool or weird, or a little bit of both. They almost look like they have fuzzy bat bodies because of their long antennae that look kinda like bats' ears. But other than that, they definitely look like moths. And yes, the Atlas moth is the biggest moth in the world in terms of its wing surface area. The Atlas moth can grow to be about 12 inches, 30 centimeters, meaning it can stretch its wings from one side of your face to the other. Atlas moths have no mouth, so even though these creatures are huge, they actually can't bite you or bite anything. Once they emerge from their cocoons, they don't eat a single thing. They rely on energy storage from their earlier stages in life to survive, and they don't have to survive for long. They typically die within about a week, and yes, that is pretty depressing. Just like the Titan beetle, it seems the Atlas moth focuses on exactly one thing once it becomes an adult. Eating more isn't important, it's all about reproduction and making way for the next generation of moth babies. Goliath bird eater. The Goliath bird eater is the largest and most disturbing spider in the world. Is it weird? Absolutely, yes. Every spider is weird in its own way. What kind of freakish creation has 8 legs, shoots webs out of its rear end, and has poisonous bites that can, in some species, actually kill a fully grown human? only a spider. But the Goliath bird eater is not poisonous. It is a walking nightmare, since it's the size of a small puppy, but it's not poisonous. Guinness World Records does have the spider listed as the largest in the world. It has a leg span of about the size of a child's forearm. Basically, this spider could probably eat your chihuahua or your guinea pig. Don't underestimate this creature. Even though it's not poisonous, it's got a few tricks when it wants to fight. One of the most unusual and dangerous tactics of this spider is that it rubs its hind legs against its abdomen, causing a cloud of hair to burst off it full of microscopic barbs. It's basically a microscopic dust cloud full of tiny needles that can get into your eyes and become extremely painful. Think about 1,000 tiny needles piercing your eyeballs and staying there for days. That is the Goliath bird eater's weirdest special power, and it's one reason I would never mess with it. Would you? Jewel beetle. How about a bedazzled beetle? Is that weird enough for you? The jewel beetle is a pretty typical insect, but they look very weird. It looks like someone got their hands on the beetle and turned it into a bedazzled cell phone case. These beetles appear to be covered in very shiny jewels, and there are a lot of different subspecies of the jewel beetle. For example, you have the glittering jewel beetle, the metal jewel beetle, the emerald jewel beetle, the brush jewel beetle, and even the giant jewel beetle. The brush jewel beetle, from an aesthetic perspective, is my favorite. It's super unique in the fact that it's bright and covered in spiky hairs. It's like a work of art in a living creature. It almost looks like a caterpillar beetle with hairs that look inherently poisonous, though they are not. But what's really weird about jewel beetles is that it can take 35 years for immature jewel beetles to turn into adults. That's a seriously long time for any organism. If you like long-lived and beautiful insects, there is a lot to be said for the jewel beetle as a very unique pet. Would you want to have one? Let me know in the comments below which is your favorite. Wax-tailed hopper. The final weird insect for today is the wax-tailed hopper. This bizarre animal has a pattern of hair that resembles one of those old troll dolls. It's super unique and very different from other animals in the rainforest. It looks like a normal fly and a half-eaten cheese string put together. Its body is super weird, and its tail appears to be shredded, but in fact, its tail is made out of wax. The wax-tailed hopper actually squirts wax from its body, wax it creates within its body thanks to the plant juices it eats, and the wax accumulates until it has formed a sort of long-haired tail. The insect uses its wax tail as protection to keep predators away from it and as a cushion in case it falls off a branch. Sometimes the waxy tail will even break off, but the wax-tailed hopper will just grow another one. Also, females will use their wax to protect their eggs until they hatch. And finally, the whiteness of all that wax helps the bug to stay camouflaged in the rainforest. So if you had a whole army of these insects, you could try to make your own candles out of their waste. And they would, without a doubt, be some extremely strange and unique candles. Which bizarre bug is the weirdest? From aircraft to failed cruise ships, here are 10 amazing abandoned vehicles with cool stories. 1947 Buick Hearse. When photos of a strange, customized Buick Hearse surfaced online in 2014, the internet was immediately set abuzz. Complete with an ornate casket-holding cargo section, broad windows, and golden angel details, it was a far cry from the original design. Built in Michigan as a standard 1947 Buick Roadmaster estate wagon, the vehicle was later shipped overseas to Greece and converted into a hearse by some unknown owner. After replacing the rear passenger seat with the cargo hold to transport a coffin, additional ornamental trim, angels and tail fins from a 1956 Chevrolet were also added. Inside, electric candelabras and ornate crosses decorate the rear compartment for those dearly departed. 18 windows, including several in the roof, allowing onlookers to view the deceased. After laying to rot and rust in a field for years, a man named Dante Fontana from Italy spotted the car and promptly bought it, and has now set up a Facebook page to detail the restoration. Canada's Space Shuttle Replica. In a small theme park on Prince Edward Island, Canada, a full-scale replica of the Space Shuttle Columbia sits in the middle of an abandoned field. Once part of the theme park known as Science Fun, the shuttle replica was one of only 6 replicas in the world with access for the general public to walk through and investigate. The centerpiece of the theme park known as Great Island Science Adventure Park, the space shuttle was designed and built by the owners to attract kids of all ages who had an affinity for space exploration. For 20 years, theme park welcomed visitors to the location who were treated to a full-scale replica of the ill-fated space shuttle Columbia in the Canadian province. Built in the 1980s 1980s, the shuttle in Atlantic Canada was part of a larger complex that housed a science center, planetarium, dinosaur museum, and other activities. Stretching nearly 40 meters long and 5 stories high at the tail, the full-size replica allowed visitors to enter through the main hatch in a true-to-life representation of the crew's living quarters. Mock-ups of all the major equipment was included, as well as mannequins in flight suits and spacesuits similar to those worn by the astronauts. Visitors were then able to visit the flight deck, allowing them to sit in the commander's seat or go to the cargo bay, the rear portion of the shuttle that was turned into a science center with hands-on activities for kids. And now for number 8, but first be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell to join us here at Talltanic for more awesome content. Ekranoplan. During the Cold War, as the United States and the Soviet Union worked against one another to build bigger, better weaponry, a Russian-built flying boat known as the Orly Anak became an entirely new class of vehicles known as Ekranoplans. Originally designed by Rostislav Alexiev, who had previously made a name for himself designing fast hydrofoil boats, the Orly Anak became an effective ground vehicle later copied for both military and civilian use. Hydrofoils use metal foils to lift the hull of the boat out of the water, resulting in decreased drag and increased speed. Able to achieve double the normal wind speed, the Orly Anak was in a class all its own. Trapping air between the wings and the water, the Orly Anak glided above the surface, making it more fuel efficient and much faster than boats. But Alexiev needed to justify how useful his design was, so in order to get funding, he made the case that the Orly Anak was designed to move troops and supplies quickly over water. Unfortunately, his secret design was not a well-kept one when, after years of prototyping and testing, a US spy plane captured images of the aircraft. But all was not necessarily lost. After analyzing the images, US intelligence deemed that it could not fly and dismissed the invention. But they were wrong. The Orly Anak was able to reach a top speed of 249 miles per hour and carry 150 personnel per trip. Its ability to take off and land on dry land meant the Ekranoplan was capable of delivering troops on a beach for an amphibious assault. Even though the design was a success, the Orly Anak and all other similar vehicles were retired in the early 1990s when the Soviet military focused its funding and research on nuclear submarines. Unfortunately, the need for specialized equipment to create such aircraft meant that the design, although unique and effective, was ultimately scrapped. Concrete ship Gutian. Known as the world's largest concrete ship, the Gutian, a 3,000-ton ship that made its first voyage in 1974, was built at a time when there was a steel shortage in China. Launched as a way to bring in a new age of sea voyages, the ship would only sail once before officials realized it would cost too much to power the concrete ship through the waters. The 345-foot-long, 48-foot-wide ship was promptly driven ashore and grounded, later becoming a popular spot for locals to squat. It also attracted tourists, becoming a minor attraction for 40 years after being beached on the banks of the Mingjiang River. Later used as a training base for the Fujian Ship Communications College, the Gutian, at first deemed too expensive to destroy, it was later prepared for demolition in 2013 after the land on which it sat was purchased for redevelopment. It took 3 months for workers to dismantle the 3,000-ton ship using heavy machinery to take apart this massive vessel, built to herald in a new age where China had mastery of the sea. The Sham Rockaway Motorhome. It's not every day that you spot a motorhome built from not 1 but 4 cars. Such is the case of the Sham Rockaway, a strange stacked custom motorhome built from 4 1962 Buick station wagons. Built in the 1960s by a Buick enthusiast named J. Dennis McGuire in Michigan, the strange-looking vehicle was crafted from one station wagon in the middle with another split in 2, the front and back ends welded onto the first. Pieces from 2 other Buicks make up the top section of the vehicle, stacked on top of the first. The motorhome also had a completely custom gearbox that allowed all 4 front wheels to turn together, an early precursor to modern steering methods. Weighing in at almost 10,000 pounds of curb weight, the Sham Rockaway stood 6 feet tall with a length of 28 feet from bumper to bumper. With such a large vehicle, it took 2 gas tanks to run, but inside it still had modern conveniences like a kitchen, a stowage area, and even a bathroom. But the Sham Rockaway was not the first vehicular invention of McGuire's. He also converted a 1942 school bus into a camper and transformed a 1958 flexible coach, a type of bus, in the 1960s. It just proves that even if necessity is the mother of invention, so too is the love of a good car. MAZ 543 Redoubt. As the Cold War gained momentum, the Soviet military needed a mobile, fortified site for defensive weapons. In an attempt to create a vehicle that was both easy to move and quick to relocate, the USSR developed a protected machine on a truck chassis that was fortified and mobile. Starting in the 1950s, various methods and mechanisms were developed and fine-tuned, but it would take almost 20 years for the Ministry of Defense to present a new concept of protected vehicle for command and control points. Codenamed Redoubt, the heavy truck with the capacity of 19 to 22 tons was adapted to operate in conditions of high humidity and dust and from -42 plus 50 Celsius at altitudes of up to 3,000 meters above sea level. With high cross-country capabilities and maneuverability in difficult conditions, the Redoubt was a massive machine that unfortunately suffered from various problems, including extracting it from frozen ground. After making some design modifications, the machine was brought into a prepared pit, allowing it to dig in and turn into a full-fledged bunker. Capacity for the machine was estimated at 10 people with 3 aircraft armchairs and various phones and displays for mobile communications. Many military leaders became interested in the Redoubt and supported the idea of mass production, but the Soviet defense minister believed it would be too costly for the Soviet budget, and unfortunately, without even wanting to see a demonstration of the Redoubt, the vehicle was scrapped. The Spruce Goose. During World War II, the United States looked for ways to ship supplies and trips overseas to Allied Britain. But with ocean travel a grim proposition with the threat of German U-boats lurking beneath the waves, the US Navy had to develop something more safe to deliver the payload they needed to make the trip worthwhile. When Howard Hughes, the Hollywood producer and aviation pioneer, decided to try to tackle the problem, he came up with the idea to utilize birch trees to create an airplane that would fly across continents and land in ports across Europe. Standing 5 stories tall and with a 300-foot-long wingspan, the H-4 Hercules, also known as the Spruce Goose, plane could transport 750 troops at a time and hold a Sherman tank inside. After spending 5 years on development, the plane, the H-4 Hercules, flew only one time for 1 mile. 16 months after the original idea, the project was abandoned after a pile of failed prototypes and little progress. With Congress spending $18 million for 3 aircraft that could be deployed in the midst of World War II, the airships were expected by the end of 1943. But when that time came and went, the project seemed to be dead in the water with no airplane delivered. After Hughes spent between $5 and $7 million of his own money to keep the project afloat, the vehicle was still in development in 1947. But to prove its worth and to justify the spending, Hughes still wanted to show off his efforts. Bringing the Hercules into the port of Long Beach, the plane was taxied down into the harbor, and with all 8 high-capacity engines running, the plane rose to about 70 feet in the air, where it stayed for about a minute at 135 miles per hour. Luckily, Hughes' display proved the Hercules could fly, satisfying Congress, who were worried about misappropriating funds. Hughes and his company later turned over the other contracted aircraft, but kept the original for himself, returning it to his hangar where it disappeared from the public eye. After spending approximately $1 million every year between 1947 and 1976 to maintain and upkeep the plane, Hughes later donated the plane to the Evergreen Aviation Museum in Oregon. Although it cost Americans $18 million, Hughes funded another $5 to $7 million to get the plane in the air. Unfortunately, the same way the H-4 Hercules disappeared, so too did Hughes, as he descended into a recluse not long after the Hercules was finished. Now dubbed the Spruce Goose, the plane would go down as one of aviation's most notorious projects that never quite lived up to the hype. Abandoned hovercraft. A district in Mumbai, India, might seem like the most unlikely of places to find an abandoned hovercraft. So how about 2? Sitting in a port, the abandoned hovercraft carcasses of the Triton 1 and the Triton 2 are the remnants of a British-built vessel that never really seemed to get off the ground. Beginning in 1996, hovercraft services began in India, ferrying more than 1,000 passengers every day between Chowpatty Beach and a suburb of Mumbai. But it seemed to be an ill-fated venture, as jetties and access roads that were to be built to the beach landing never materialized. When local fishermen began to anchor the boats in the path of the hovercrafts, the vehicles were obstructed from entering or leaving the landing zone. Even though the hovercrafts were successful at sea, Bureaucracy, insufficient infrastructure, and local opposition combined to sink the service before it got off the dry land. Officially terminated in 1998, the hovercrafts are now abandoned on dry land. Although they were only built in 1992, the elements have taken their toll on the vehicles, and they now sit in an abandoned graveyard, battered by the elements and wasting away. Some also say that with a new hovercraft venture coming to light, the original vehicles were broken up for scrap, still giving them an opportunity to reach their potential, but not in the way the original designers of the Triton 1 and 2 initially planned. Abandoned Ukraine excavators. Up until 9 years ago, the Morozov open-cast mine was one of the most active mines in Ukraine. Now, hundreds of coal trucks, once loaded every hour by huge excavators, stand abandoned and rusting. Operating until 2009, the company barely survived the 90s. When a power outage due to unpaid debts took over the mine, the Soviet and German equipment was left abandoned and the staff reduced, resulting in the quarry quickly filling the once busy mine with groundwater. With an estimated number of deposits of coal that would allow for 20 more years of active production, the site, which is now littered with large bucket excavators, is slowly being taken over by nature, with grass and trees now growing in the mining areas. With many of the machines built for the Second World War, the Morozov mine is a stark reminder of the industrialized Soviet Union. After it was dissolved, Ukraine became independent and didn't need so many industrial sites as entire cities were abandoned. The site began operation in the late 1980s, producing more than 1 million tons of coal per year. But being closed for so many years, nature has found a way to endure, with water and vegetation once again taking over the land. SS Aqua Rama. Built in 1945 as a troop transport ship for the Navy during World War II, the SS Aqua Rama, originally named the SS Marine Star, made only one trip across the Atlantic before combat ended. The ship was purchased in 1952 by a Detroit industrialist who spent the $8 million converting it into a cruise ferry ship, taking passengers between Detroit and Cleveland with the occasional stop in Buffalo. There were 9 decks with 4 restaurants, 4 bars, movie theaters, and even recreation areas. The ship could also hold 160 cars and 2,600 passengers. The SS Aqua Rama spanned 520 feet long and weighed 12,000 tons. The largest passenger ship to sail on the Great Lakes, the size and luxury of the ship came at a price, with operating costs being too much to keep up with. After various mishaps and changing hands a few times with ill-fated plans to revitalize and refurbish the ship that never materialized, the ship later ended up sitting for more than a decade in Buffalo, with plans to turn it into a casino. Ultimately, the ship ended up in Turkey, where it was scrapped in 2007, putting the rest of the dreams of the SS Aqua Rama from reaching its full potential as a luxury ship for elegant travel. Thanks for watching. Which abandoned vehicle did you think was the most interesting? Let us know, and be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go.